Hey everybody, it's Amy Fox with Work in Progress Texas. I am live in our Couples Do It Together free Facebook community to talk about these new wonder drugs called semaglutides, which go under the brand name of Wegovy and Ozempic, and they're definitely creating a very large stir here. So I wanted to give myself time before I talked about something like this for a couple of reasons. So one thing is obviously when new things come out, it can definitely be like a flashy, shiny object. And I kind of wanted to see what the response would be with them. And then to be transparent, we had two clients who decided to end coaching to go explore this opportunity. And they've actually been an amazing resource for us. And I've continued to stay in touch with them to just really hear about their experience. One person was able to start it because they qualified for it. The other person is still working on that. And then we had a client join us who has been on these medications for the past year and would like to wean off of them, which is pretty exciting. So I've actually had a day in the life of somebody who is on the prescription, seeing their food journals, seeing everything that's coming through. And it's definitely an interesting thing to observe. So I wanted to express some empathy towards this and actually maybe surprise y'all. Maybe I'm surprising y'all by saying like, hey, I'm not going to sit here and bash all of these actually. I want you guys to have informed consent when it comes to looking at pharmaceuticals. And I'm always going to be an advocate for trying the natural way, getting back to our roots, avoiding medications at all costs. But I'm not going to lie and say that there are some people in certain health situations where something like this might be the stepping stone they need to get to that next level, to get to that healthier position. Because we know for sure that this came out originally to help treat diabetes, type 2 diabetes in particular. And sometimes when things come out and we try the medication for something, we find that it actually does something else. You know, the one that comes to mind all the time is Viagra. Like, oh, it's a blood pressure medication, but guess what else it does? You know, so obviously there's been a result that's happened to people who have started this medication, and that result has been weight loss, or maybe it's a symptom. You could even say that from the medication itself. So I figured the structure of the call, let's talk about what it is, what they are, what does it work? You know, we're focusing on semaglutides, but other things are coming out too. There's another one called Mounjaro, and it's like it starts with a T. I should have written that down. It's a different version. But I foresee now that they have seen what this semaglutide does, making alternate options that maybe aren't directly to treat diabetes, but maybe they're meant for weight loss. And so I feel like more are going to come out. So we're going to focus on the main one, the semaglutide. So, you know, basically what we're going to go over what it is, side effects, risks and benefits, some indicators of who should be on it, who should not be on it. And then let's talk about like, if you are not going on it, some natural ways to have an appetite suppressant. And then if you are going on it, some suggestions. So let's dig into it. And like I said, I will get and look for comments later. And if you guys have any questions, email us, comment below, whatever works for you guys. So Ozempic, basically it controls blood sugar in several different ways. It contains an ingredient called semaglutide, and that works by mimicking the effects of a hormone called glucagon-like peptides -1. So it's GLP-1. And actually it's produced naturally in the body, and it's in the response to food. And so what it does is it helps stimulate insulin secretion and then reduce the amount of glucose produced by the liver. And then it slows down the rate at which food is absorbed into the bloodstream. So when Ozempic is basically injected, I should have asked like where they inject, but I'm pretty sure it's on the stomach, but it might be different spots. I'll confirm that. But basically it binds to those GLP-1 receptors, and it helps to increase insulin secretion and reduce the amount of glucose produced by the liver. And that in turn helps to lower blood sugar levels, especially after meals. And then it also, you know, in addition to its effects on blood sugar, it can help with obviously weight loss. And so what that does is it reduces your appetite and it increases your feeling of fullness. And so obviously for people who have type 2 diabetes, this could be an amazing thing for weight management. So really kind of I always like layman's terms. Of course, I'm looking for explanations. I'm utilizing things that I've researched and found, but the short answer is basically it slows down the digestive system as a whole. And so you're basically interfering the natural process, but you're still using things that mimic what's already in your body, but it is slowing things down. So what happens is some side effects, some risks, some things we'll get into. But it's important to note, and I'm going to make sure that I post 2 podcasts that I found to be very, very helpful. One has kind of that layman's terms explanation, and one has a more sciencey explanation. One of them is by a coach that I really like, who had 2 doctors on who actually have a clinic where they do prescribe this, and they have they do a whole dietary thing, a whole vetting the people to make sure they're a good candidate for it, and really a great job explaining how this works and how it can be utilized. And then the other podcast was actually from 2017, which is about the time it was approved for type 2 diabetes. And a doctor came on the Mind Pump podcast, really going over all of it. And he was really tucked some big words in there, but the hosts kind of helped break down that information. So I'll make sure I include that, because what I learned from that Mind Pump podcast is the peptide conversation. It's like, well, these are peptides that we're talking about. These are things that are in our body. And so what are peptides? Basically, they're short chains of amino acids that are linked together by peptide bonds. And amino acids are the building blocks of your protein. And that's why we love protein. They can be considered like smaller, simpler versions of protein, and peptides are found naturally in the body. And they play an important role for the biological process, like hormone regulation, immune system function, and of course, cell signaling. So, there's lots of different peptides, and probably some popular ones are going to be the insulin and glucagon, or glucagon, however you would say that, and then which helps regulate blood sugar. And then there's the growth hormone releasing ones like the GHRH, and they play in growth development. So some peptides have been developed in the medications like we're talking about today, and then they have been dominantly used to treat type 2 diabetes as well as cancer, which is pretty interesting. So, but you can also find peptides like naturally in protein sources like meat, fish, eggs, dairy products. And some people will use supplements, but there haven't been maybe a lot of studies on that. One of the things about the supplement world is sometimes there aren't a lot of studies on supplements either, just like there might not be long-term studies on some of these prescriptions that we're talking about. So when you are slowing down the digestive system and you're interfering with that, you can get some side effects. So the more minor side effects are going to be nausea and vomiting, diarrhea, headache, abdominal pain, constipation, decreased appetite, obviously, and then fatigue. And I'm sure fatigue is probably coming from lack of food. I mean, that's where I'm going to kind of connect fatigue, because if you are severely under eating, you're obviously going to have some energy struggle too. Now, the other bigger things that we need to take into consideration here that are some risks are pancreatitis, which is inflammation of the pancreas, hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar, kidney problems, gallbladder problems, and allergic reactions. Obviously, there can always be an allergic reaction to a prescription. The other concerning thing is potential like thyroid issues. When you're severely eating for a long period of time, that can affect your thyroid. And also when you're accelerating things, like when we're talking about cells, and there's a possibility that cancer can be related to this too. So we have to take those are pretty serious things you have to take into consideration. So technically, when you're being prescribed something like this, the best situation is that you have a doctor closely monitoring you. We are not wanting to try to acquire this online somehow through a storefront or whatever. We are wanting to be monitored by a physician to make sure that we are having regular checkups. And our client that has had a lot of success on this prescription has been monitored closely. And so we'll talk about maybe some things on who should be considered for this or whatever. Obviously, if you're pregnant, let's please not do Ozempic. You should not be worried about losing weight at that point. It should not be used for pregnancy. Of course, I'll throw that in there. So if we're thinking about candidates, who would be a good candidate for this prescription? So we're going to say, like, if you've got blood sugar issues and other diabetic medications have not helped it, like such as like metformin, for example, you obviously could consider something like this, because that's what it's meant to do. It's actually meant to treat a diagnosis, a chronic disease. If other medications cause side effects, this could be a good option for you. And then if you're looking to reduce a cardiovascular event, that's another reason for potentially being a good candidate. So obviously, when people are struggling with weight, I mean, if we've learned anything the last couple of years, obesity leads to so many other problems. So sometimes when you're struggling, you're at a point where you've actually been diagnosed with something, this, your weight management becomes really important, because if you have over 30% body fat, you're in the obese category, more than likely you've got chronic diseases that are starting to creep in, especially as you get older. And we know that your body and your immune system is weaker when you've got those chronic diseases, and it causes problems, and it against your defense mechanisms are weakened. So, if you got in the hospital, you're at a higher risk of problems. And those are things that we have to take seriously. So in a situation where somebody is obese and it's a matter of kind of like life or death in some situations, this could be a better option than lap band surgery or stomach surgery, because obviously bariatric surgery is a very common thing in our country too. And that has a lot of risk and struggles with that. So it's almost like I would much rather you take an injection potentially without us knowing the long-term effects of it than maybe going under for a risky, really risky surgery. But I would say people who, are not a good candidate for this. I mean, if you've had issues if you've got type 1 diabetes, obviously that's not a good thing. Any history of thyroid carcinoma, personal family history of endocrine issues, any history of pancreatitis, gallbladder problems, kidney problems, liver problems, like those, any kind of intestinal issue, you are not a candidate for this medication at all. So that's something that has to be considered, is what is your current state? What is your current situation? So this is not meant for somebody to lose 20 pounds. Like this, we're going to get serious here. It's a matter of like, what is your problem? What are you struggling with? What's going on? And I can sincerely say our client who has gone this direction and has lost a good amount of weight, still has more to go, is being monitored, was very thoughtful before she started it. She was about to be prescribed a bunch of medications. And this literally has reduced her need for those medications because she's been able to get the weight off. So in certain situations, I could be supportive of this if you have pre-diabetes, if you have type 2 diabetes, if you have obesity issues that are kind of connected to this stuff. But in my book, like a diagnosis makes sense if you're looking into something like this, because if we can get rid of the diabetes risk and the other chronic diseases that are caused by obesity, it's potentially something to consider. If you don't have any health issues, what's really sad is hearing people who are trying to have health issues, who are trying to have an A1C that stinks, which is that 3-month measurement for your blood sugar. And that's what's concerning about how this can get abused, because there's an ugly side of pharma, right? There's a greedy side of pharma. There's a awesome sciencey discovery, like, cool, look what we fixed, we can figure this out. And then there's like stuff that causes problems with pharma. Like there's always a risk with a prescription that you're going to take. There's never, ever like not a risk. So you have to see, the risk of losing fat for my health versus all of the potential side effects and symptoms that can happen with this prescription. So this, to me, if you are a healthy person and you feel exhausted, that you've tried everything and you feel like this is the only thing that you can turn to, but you don't have any of these diagnoses, my personal opinion would be like, you have not found the right coach then to help you. You have not found the right system to help you. I don't know if a medication is going to help you, because if you don't figure out the deep work, the true deep work of what got you into that position, what got us into an unhealthy position, and really work on that, guess what? Even when you take a prescription, it doesn't fix all of that, right? So one of the things that we're seeing with people who are on this prescription as well is their calories are definitely, potentially 1,400 is being generous or less. and on average seeing closer to that 600,000 calorie mark a day, which is reminding me of things like Optavia. Okay. So the beautiful thing about that is you're naturally in a calorie deficit because you have no hunger. The sad thing about that though, is when you're losing weight, you're also losing muscle. So according to the doctors, it's not the prescription that causes muscle loss. It's the fact that you aren't even eating enough to keep muscle on your body. So the weight that you're losing is going to be a combination of both. When we work with clients, the goal is to just lose fat, which means the fat loss journey is a little bit slower. And that's what's harder, but slower wins the race. So what we're seeing is that the muscle loss that's happening is really due to people severely undereating because there's absolutely no appetite. So feedback that I've gotten from the clients that have been going on it, like one of the things they had to optimize was making sure that they are picking the right nutrition while they're on that. Because guess what? If you're not hungry, what do you think you're going to eat? You're going to eat things that maybe you might have eaten in large quantities before you went on the medication, but because you've got an appetite regulation going on with the prescription, you're able to kind of slow down and not eat as much cereal, not eat as much ice cream, not eat as much yogurt, because you just need a little bit of pleasure in your mouth of enjoyment of food, and then you're good to go. So that's where people have to really push past this decrease in hunger and actually optimize their nutrition. And the podcast that I'll post, they talk about what you should do if you're on this prescription. Because guess what doesn't change when you're on this prescription? You still have to work on sleep and stress. You still have to work on hydration, especially when your digestive system things slow down. You definitely need hydration. You still have to do resistance training. And guess what? You still have to eat a high protein diet in order to not lose weight. And guess what is the natural appetite suppressant? Protein. Like eating tons of protein is a natural appetite suppressant. In fact, other appetite suppressants would be like high fiber foods, like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, that can always slow down and make you feel fuller faster. Protein rich foods, always animal proteins, good quality dairy, beans, legumes, whatever else extra. Drinking water before your meals can help with that too. Green tea has compounds in it, like I think it's called like catechins, and that has helped to increase your metabolism and promote weight loss. And then there's even certain spices like cayenne pepper and ginger and other things that can help be an appetite suppressant. So we actually do have food sources that can help with satiation. In fact, when we have clients in a calorie deficit, we are always prioritizing protein and even bumping up the protein just a little bit because it helps you feel fuller faster on a smaller amount of food. So it helps you get into that calorie deficit. Now, I will say one of the things that the client had, our client who's taken the semaglutides here has noticed is that because the hunger signals are turned off due to the medication, mentally, they're not thinking about food or obsessing about food all of the time. So in one of those podcasts, they're going to talk about that there is maybe this gene in there that plays a role, but I just don't want it to get misconstrued that we are all of a sudden diagnosing ourselves and thinking that there's a reason why we're overweight that is out of our control. And that's a big narrative that's happening right now too. And truly, if we have pictures from the 70s of people at the beach in bikinis and swimming trunks, and there's barely an obese person on the beach, but now that's a different situation, we have to recognize what's changed in between them. And it will always be an overconsumption of food. You're eating too much, right? And you're not eating a good split between your protein, carbs, and fats. And that's where I say, if you are exhausted and having a terrible time losing weight, first off, it might be something that's a deeper rooted issue that might need therapy. It might be something bigger than that. And I think if you have the right doctors looking in to see who qualifies for these prescriptions, especially if they don't have a diagnosis, hopefully those things are being addressed. Because here's the thing, if your insurance stops paying for it because it's $1,500 out of pocket, if you wanted to do it per month, $1,500 a month. So you better believe insurance companies are going to be kind of paying attention to who's being prescribed this, because if we're paying for it, not only is the pharmaceutical company making tons of money off of that, but we're going to make sure that you qualify for that. So think about you being on it and then all of a sudden your insurance stopping, and then you can't have, your insurance doesn't cover it anymore. So you all of a sudden are left hanging. What do you think is going to happen? Your hunger signals are going to come back. You didn't change any of your behaviors. You're going to put the weight back on. The goal should be that you're on this prescription, you intentionally have a plan, you eat a high protein diet, you stay hydrated, you continue to resistance train, and then you get to the point where you're ready to get off of it. And because you've instilled those good habits, you don't like all of a sudden cave and gain all the weight back. That's one reason why we're so blessed to have somebody come work with us who said, like, look, I'm ready to get off of this at some point. I'm almost to my goal. I don't want to take it forever. Now it's time to do the work and figure out, okay, let's get a nutrition plan that's going to work for you. Let's get you set up for success so that you can get off this medication and not gain the weight back. And guess what? That's where we have to change nutrition. It always comes back to nutrition. So I would say if you're, on it, obviously focusing on a whole nutrient dense foods, you're going to limit carbohydrate intake because carbohydrates can obviously impact your sugar levels. You're going to eat regularly, stay hydrated. And of course, you could consider working with a dietitian on it too. Obviously, I'm not a big fan of the dietitian, what they learn and what they treat or teach. But ultimately, like working with a coach still would be relevant to you because, again, there are bigger things that we have to uncover when it comes to a fat loss journey and what you're experiencing. So, really, I think I'm not here to bash it. I want you guys to know what it does. Be aware of the potential side effects. There are no long-term studies on this. It could very well be something that has a bad side effect down the road. We don't know. And so technically people who are starting it's kind of an experiment. And there are people like celebrities who can get their hands on it and it's fine. But truly, in my personal opinion, if you don't have a diagnosis of anything, you don't have 50 pounds or more to lose, this really, we need to figure out a different way. There's a better way to do this. You don't have to go this route. But if you have a diagnosis of prediabetes or type 2 diabetes or some other chronic diseases or a risk of being put on lots of medication and you truly are struggling, I am certainly not going to be one to diss anybody on this because guess what? I believe in bodily autonomy. We should be able to freely decide what goes in our body. And that is applicable to everything. So if we ever had clients coming to us like we did, say, I'm going to go this route, we are going to make sure you take an educated look at all of the options, the risks. What is this benefit to you? How can we help you through it? How can we keep you on it the shortest amount of time possible? Maybe that's an option. And let's get you through it so you don't have to rely on it for the rest of your life. I'm just not going to sit here and diss it like maybe some other health professionals have. I totally get it. But I also want to be empathetic because some people are embarrassed that they're on it. Some people are hiding that they're on it. And that's because they don't want the judgment that comes with it. And I think we just have to have an even keel of like, okay, let's look at this down. Let's break it down. What is this for this person? What's their situation? But if your situation isn't with a pre-diabetic or a type 2 diabetes or some other chronic diseases, we really have to look at the other options. There are natural ways to suppress your appetite. There are other options that we can do that fit your lifestyle. And it also takes time and patience that will never go away. Even people who are on Ozempic still are losing maybe 2 pounds a week. So if you're in a calorie deficit, usually on average, you can lose 1 pound a week. So maybe it goes a little bit faster, but ultimately, again, bottom line, if you're not working on your heart and your mind at the same time with your health journey, it doesn't matter what you do. You're never going to get final food freedom out of this. And I think one of my next talks I will do is how gaining another 20 pounds, again, what it's taught me about this journey. That'll be probably next week. But that is all she wrote for this information. If you have questions, comments, concerns, or want to talk about it, I would love to hear it. I'm going to end the recording here, and I really appreciate you watching, and I look forward to chatting with anyone who wants to talk about it. So have a great day or night, whatever time you're watching this.